And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Frankie Russo. He is an author. He's a speaker. He has built, sold, scaled multiple businesses in a bunch of different industries, and he's going to spend some time with us today. Welcome aboard, Frankie.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Looking forward to being on.
So let me ask you one of sort of the questions I love to ask folks, which is basically, how the heck did this happen? How'd you get here?
Well, it depends on what here is. You mean like thought leadership?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So we could talk about all kinds of stuff. I got sober 17 years ago, so some people like to ask me about that. I'm a dad of 6, married twice, 7, 8 businesses, blah, blah, blah. But thought leadership. Okay. So how did we get here? So it started out a rainy day. Just kidding. It was about 2014. And I had a client that I had helped with some different things who used to be in the publishing business. And she was, she worked with Jack Canfield back in the glory days of Chicken Soup for the Soul. Okay.
Yep.
And she was tired of being on the road, so she started an Apple store. And I had a company that was helping Apple stores launch and be challenger brands, all this fun stuff.
Yep.
Which is one of my many previous careers and businesses. But anyway, I'd always kind of been the entrepreneur that would stare at the books in what do they call those things? Bookstores, Barnes and Nobles.
Oh, yeah.
Barnes and Nobles.
They sell candles now, right?
Yeah.
That's where you go to get candles.
We were still in there. Okay. Anyway, so I used to love back in the 2000s,
Yep.
just looking at those books and looking at that and thinking what book do I need to read next to be successful? And so I always had this kind of starry-eyed idea of being one of those books. And it wasn't until 2014 that this person came to me. They said, look, you did something special for me. You helped me out at a time that I needed a lot of help. And I want to repay you somehow. And I said, well, you had mentioned something about how it's so easy to write a book. So what if we did that? And she was like, oh yeah, just an outline and we'll get that thing written. And so I was like, really? I was like, how's that work? She's like, well, she's talking about ghostwriters.
Yeah.
So now she's like, I'm going to bring in Dave Ramsey's lead ghostwriter. Yep. Who wrote Entree to Leadership, and that's going to be the ghostwriter. I'm like, this is awesome. So it's 2014, so I'm still 7 years from my exit with the company. And so we did that. It took about 2 years, 3 ghostwriters. It was a dumpster fire trying to get it done while trying to do everything else. But I finally put a book out called The Art of Why. Now, a couple things. One, I was 35 and way too young. I'm not saying you can't write a book at 35, but I didn't know shit. Can we curse on this or can you get to bleep that out?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I didn't know shit.
Let me pause you there, though. I would say that, you can't write a book at 35. I would counter that with say, I always wonder who's the one hiring the 23-year-old life coach. But I think sometimes the reasons you might choose to write a book at 35
depends on the book.
Well, it's also the book you need to read, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And it was the book that I needed to read, minus a lot of the extra stories about Michael Jordan and everybody else's copy and pasted ghostwriter stories that go into the.
Yep.
I didn't know any of that. I was just like, look at this. We did it. We're an author. I have a book. It's a bestseller, blah, blah, blah. And then that was it. And maybe I did a few talking gigs here and there, but I thought this is it. Cool. That was it. That's my manifesto. And after a while, I started to realize, the thing about nonfiction books, especially business books.
Sure.
If you're in the outlier where you're it just takes off, which rarely is the first book.
Of course.
A lot of books, the first book we've ever heard of, it was not their first book. And it's the New York Best Time sellers. I can tell you right now, for me, is going to be the third book.
Yeah.
Which I haven't written yet. And I'm purposely not writing because I have enough books to say I have books.
Yes.
And I want the book to be a true contribution. And I'm not saying
but expand beyond the book, because I would say that when I asked you how'd you get here,
right, I'm about to tell you.
As an author, I mean, a book is
right
that live.
Well, that's where I'm going to. Exactly. Okay. So the point is, I thought I was an author.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I sold my company that I realized I needed to be a thought leader.
Tell me how you're defining the difference between an author and a thought leader? Because I would say most thought leaders are authors. Not
Correct.
all authors can be, or should be thought leaders.
That's right. That's right. So the difference is exactly how you said it. An author is one of the platforms that I use for thought leadership. I didn't realize until about 4 years ago that the premium and most important, kind of closest connected to me calling of the optional platforms, which is like podcasting and
Right.
books and panels and articles and white papers and all kinds of stuff you can do, research, is this thing I realized. So I was in the music business when I was a kid, and I was like trying to be a rock star and all this other stuff, had long hair and all this.
Yep.
And there's one thing I learned from that. One, I just can't sing good enough. And two, if you want to make money in the music business, unless your song somehow magically makes it to Grey's Anatomy, for all you kids out there, Grey's Anatomy was one of the first sitcoms that brought licensing music to like this like rock star status. Anyway, unless you do that, there's only one way you're making money as a musician, and that's on tour.
Right.
And so I realized that for thought leaders, for nonfiction, if I want to make a living at this, my best bet was to pursue something that I already love to do, which is to go on tour. They call that the keynote speaker. And so that right there helped me expand to realize, okay, this isn't about a book or keynotes or podcasts. It's not about any one thing. It's about a calling and a movement that's inside of me that I believe is worth making my career around, helping other people with.
Right. So stay there for a minute. You've launched and built multiple businesses. Your IP and your thought leadership helps many other people do that. So you're at a stage in your life where you could make some choices. You might say, I want to be an investor, be a little bit more passive. I want to be an advisor. I want to be a board member, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be doing what you're doing. But the fact, and I think this is a key piece, because I would argue most thought leaders are doing what they're doing at least partly. It might be 5% of the reason, could be 90% of the reason, because they know what they are about to share with someone else, whether it's on the stage or whatever the modality is powerful, transformative, real, authentic, etc. And they are the embodiment. They're eating that dog food every day.
Yeah.
And it's part of what drives them. And in many instances, it holds them back potentially from other opportunities, financially, spending more time at home, blah, blah, blah.
Totally.
So stay there for a minute, because I see, you light up when you talk about it, right? Like I think most people, if you talk to the typical insurance salesman or actuary about why they do what they do, they might say that it's helping people, this, that, and the other thing. But and that may be true, but they don't light up in the same way that a thought leader lights up.
No. And I think that's because, we all deep down inside want to contribute something, especially because a lot of thought leadership, at least the space I'm in, is in the work world, right?
Yeah.
And I came to this place after years of being in the work world to realize that, like, if I want to change the world, the regular full world, then my best bet is to reverse engineer that from the work world. Because if you fix the work world, for example, to make it have less human collateral and to be more human, the chances are, at least in this country, you're going to help transform the whole world, or at least this country's world.
Well, and stay there for a minute, because my work with my clients is almost exclusively B2B, right? And people misinterpret that to mean that the only beneficiary of the interventions, of the work they do, et cetera, is organization X that's writing the check to the client to deliver the stuff. And I would argue, no, this is about personal transformation, development, et cetera. And to me, a litmus test of some of the best thought leadership out there is the stuff that you're giving someone in the workplace as a manager, leader, salesperson, whatever. And without having to be told so, you hear the stories of they come back and said, I tried that thing on whether it's listening skills, empathy, resilience, leadership on my ... spouse, kids, partner, friend, whatever. And wow, it works after 5:00 at night too. It works.
Yeah.
Like, this is pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I think that all good thought leadership should do that. I mean, at the end of the day, there are certain principles in this world, and I tell people all the time, it's like, I used to think that truth was something that was like maybe like created, or, I have my own truth. But the fact is, truth in a universal sense is not created, it's discovered. And there are certain truths in this universe that are universal, and they are they're important for what I would call hacking this matrix. All right. So we live in a three-dimensional world that is
Yep.
mostly constrained by gravity. In general, it's good for us. Gravity is one of those things I have a very weird relationship with. I've always wanted to go anti-gravity from a very young age. So freeing people from the gravitational pull of this third dimension is something I've realized is maybe my highest calling. Now, what that means, I don't know that that's going to be like Starlink or, you know, working with SpaceX. But when you think about it, you peel it back. There's nothing in a business that shouldn't also be good for a human. And for example, what is the most fulfilling, the biggest high that's natural, and the most rewarding thing that a human can do while in this third dimension? And in my opinion, that's being of maximum usefulness to other people. And that looks different for every person, but that's the consistent universal component. And it turns out there's a science behind a lot of this stuff.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave a 5-star review at ratethis.com/LTL and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcasts and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcast.
And so
stay there for a minute, because
yeah,
in
go ahead.
the corporate world, we tend to break things down based on function, responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. So as you're talking about sort of the human piece, how do companies sort of take that? Well, we have the experience folks, we got customer experience, right? And that focuses on the customer journey, being good to customers, making it easy for them to buy online, offline. So everything from the experience in a retail environment to the online environment. And then there's a whole other group of people, the HR folks, that deal with employee experience. And I would argue that the principles are the same. People want to be treated with respect, with dignity. They want to have autonomy. They don't want to go through unnecessary things that they don't see a reason for it. But we separate those two things. And I would argue good customer experience and good employee experience are more similar than not, with some couple of caveats here and there. But
There's that
human experience.
Yeah, look, I call them stakeholders. So a lot of times people think, and I thought this for a long time. I never forget when I went to the first Inc. 500 conference, I thought, this is unbelievable. I'm never going to do this again. Went on to do it 8 times, but I never forget that conference. Like, what the hell is this? Because I'm thinking this is like a celebration, right? And I get there and speakers are saying shit like, your profits are for your community, your employees, and your, who else? I don't know. It was somebody else, but it was not me. And it was not stockholders. That's not what the profits were for. That's not what the company was for. And I was like, what are you talking about? Of course it is. And that was a beginning of a real wake-up call for me. This was 2013. Today, a lot's changed, and it's partly how I remained successful, is that I started to realize that stakeholders, not stockholders, not owners, not CEOs, not C-suite, but stakeholders, which are customers, or if you're in the healthcare business, patients, if you're in the software business, users, if you're in the credit union business, members, whatever it is, those stakeholders plus colleagues, those are the people you work with, and the community. Stakeholders and a great company rises or falls based on one simple concept. And that concept is, how radically aligned is the collective genius of what we offer to the stakeholders. That's it.
Mhm.
That's it. You stay radically aligned to the stakeholders, bringing them the collective genius of what you have to offer. You will grow inevitably, and you will grow continuously. And it's that simple. And that's the same for humans. Like if I'm radically aligned to the people around me that I serve, whether that's a drug addict, whether that's my wife, whether that's my kids, whether that's you, whether that's anyone, the whole point.
But roll that back a little bit, because
All right, go ahead.
I want to pivot a little bit in terms of, you're clear about what the work is. You're clear about who you're serving. Now talk to me about, you're the scale guy, right? Your work is all about scale. As a thought leader, I'm going to have you, apply your own stuff to your own world. How do you scale that? Because if you're speaking in Miami today, you can't be in Cleveland the same day. If you're talking to me right now, you can't be talking to somebody else right now. So what are the derivatives of your work, the modalities, the formats, et cetera, that are both monetizable and enable you to be freed up, but also scale the ideas, the methodologies, the frameworks and such? Have you gone after that?
Yeah, so the scaling is multifaceted. So what can happen when I'm not in the room? A couple of things. First off, you have content that's going to be out there that's evergreen, mostly video in nature, podcasts, things like that. That's part of like the real like outer layer of the scale. And then so that starts to bring more and more people into this new mindset shift that's creating this movement. You're right. I can only be in one stage at a time, unless there's virtual or if we use those hologram boxes that sometimes you can use. Besides that, yeah. So how do you scale beyond that? So one of the things we did was start the Growth Co. The Growth Co is basically the activation component for multiple companies, multiple organizations to be activated at the same time, in addition to just the keynote. Because the keynote is the tip of the spear. It's very, very important. It's because that's the thing that changes what people believe. Like you can talk about
Shake them out of their plan. So the keynote, because it's experiential, we're in
catalyst.
together, you're literally sort of kind of grabbing me by the shoulders and shaking me out of the trance.
That's right.
For a moment, right? And now you got my attention. It's the
Now what do we do? Yeah, so what we had to develop over the years, and this was from a lot of our companies and then working with hundreds of other companies, we basically created an operating system.
Yes.
Right? And so it's the growth operating system, and we have different components to it, but essentially it's like think of an infinity loop.
Yeah.
And the idea is that most of the people that come to us, they're in what's called the stagnation spiral. And so when you're in a stagnation spiral, it's basically you're in denial, you've got status quo getting all over the place, you have these silos because hell, you got successful, so now you got to organize it. You got all these rigid processes, and then you have disengagement. So those are kind of the horsemen of the sea. So if you're in that, something has to hijack that to get into this operating system. And that hijack is an inflection point so that you can stop that downward spiral and bring it back up. And that's where this infinity growth loop creates not only inflection point, but can be expanded into a full operating system at the company to make growth not just a one-time inflection point, continuous.
So stay there for a minute, because what's interesting is when you think about what happens on the stage for keynoters, right?
Mhm.
There's a continuum. Some of it is, and you mentioned, you wanted to be a rock star when you were a kid. Some of it was just purely theatrics, right? Somebody can do something crazy. They could juggle, or they could scream, or they're really
Musician, magician, a comedian.
improv, and a lot of folks that get into this have some of that in their background, because that's important on the stage side, right?
That's right. A keynote is not a lecture. That's for sure.
The business that thought leaders are in, and not all of them articulate it in this way, is changing behaviors at the individual level that drive business outcomes that are measurable. That's the business you're in. That doesn't happen as the result of a keynote. I don't care how good you are. 40 minutes on stage with 300 sales guys from Kentucky. Yeah, you could keep them engaged.
Or if it's Ohio, you can do it. But Kentucky, no. I'm just kidding. Only in Louisiana can we do that in 30 minutes. But yeah, you're right.
The point is, you've got to say the place for the keynote is to shake them out of the trance. And then I love things that are systems based, because now what do I take back to the office of the organization, to the corporation, and touch every day? It's got to be systems based. It can't be charisma driven, personality driven, or well, Frankie's such a special dude because he's got the oomph, whatever that means. Okay.
Right.
Well, I'm never.
Or he tells good stories, or he's got a great resume. Yep.
Which is all fine and dandy, but I'm worried about what do I do when I go back to my office, right? In 2 days after this conference.
And even if I have the full playbook for that, I still can't get that all in an hour. Otherwise, it'll be the most miserable hour you've ever experienced. And I've seen it tried. Maybe in my early days, I tried it.
One, I think the dosing, if you will, of when you give them what to expect what outcome, because a lot of times as thought leaders, we're so passionate, and we know if I can sit down with you for 3 minutes, I could just fill your brain up with a whole bunch of stuff. Well, the problem is the retention. As soon as you get it from the chair, you're like, I don't know what the heck that guy was talking about. I think I like him or I don't like him, but I don't know.
It's hard, man. I'm going to tell you, like it's hard, and it's a muscle you got to practice a lot. We call it the reps, but the hardest part of keynote speaking is what you're not going to say. that is the most work I do these days, is like, what am I cutting out of this 3-day immersive experience that we should be doing together and cutting into an hour based on what I know about your problem that you're dealing with, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been great. I appreciate your time, appreciate the effort, and appreciate you sharing your story with us, Frankie. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Happy to be on. Always a pleasure, brother.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.